The Pilgrims and the Puritans. Your essential question for this PowerPoint is, how did the Pilgrims and the Puritans create their own way of life after settling in the New World? Remember, there was no government to back them up at this point. Nobody was here except for the Native Americans. First, we're going to review Jamestown. As you guys read in the DBQ, colonists came to the New World in 1607. They settled in Jamestown, Virginia, which was located in a swampy area. This swampy area wasn't really great for farming. They spent their time looking for gold, not food, and eventually ran out of their food supply. By the spring, only 38 of the original 100 colonists had survived the winter. So England had sent John Smith to save the day. And he saved the day by establishing a trade relationship with the Native Americans. Eventually, John Smith became injured, and he had to go back to England. Later on, tobacco started to be harvested in Jamestown. The crop led to a flourishing economy and a trade route that established between Europe and North America. The settlement started to thrive, which means it grew. And African slaves were eventually coming to the New World. They were used as cheap labor. There were also indentured servants. Many were European, came to America, and had to work off their trip for so many years. Be sure to write in your question column. The Pilgrims. A pilgrim is a person who takes a religious journey. In 1620, 100 pilgrims started their voyage to Virginia from Europe, but were knocked off course and settled in Massachusetts. They called their home Plymouth and believed that they were not bound by the rules of the Virginia Company. The Virginia Company was establishing rules for Jamestown. So these colonists believed that they could claim the right to govern themselves. They did so using the Mayflower Compact. It was signed by 41 Pilgrim men in the Massachusetts colony. It called for a government that would make and follow just and equal laws, and it would elect men into office. But I have a question for you. What about the women? The first Thanksgiving. During the winter of 1620 to 1621, the Pilgrims were in need of crops and food. Half the population had died, and they weren't prepared enough to harvest or grow their own food. Pilgrims stole from the Native Americans. They took corn and other crops. Native American tribes eventually stepped in and saved the Pilgrims. They made an agreement between each other to protect each other from other tribes, and the Pilgrims helped the colonists plant crops. In the fall of 1621, the Pilgrims set aside a day to give thanks for their good fortune. It was originally considered a harvest celebration, the first Thanksgiving, and it was declared a holiday by Abraham Lincoln in 1863, which was 200 years after the first Thanksgiving. The Puritans. The most famous Puritans lived in a small community called Salem in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The community was founded in 1692. They had left England because they wanted to break free from the Church of England due to disagreements. They were also known as Calvinists and established several settlements in this area. They originally came to North America as 900 people in 1630. By the mid-1630s, their population grew to about 20,000. One of their most famous settlements is Salem and Boston. Their beliefs varied from the Church of England. They believed that God had already decided whether or not you'd go to heaven or hell from the moment that you were born. This was called predestination. They also believed that the devil was constantly trying to tempt them, and this made them a very paranoid people. They also believed that towns and churches should manage their own affairs, and each town govern itself by using town meetings. During the town meetings, people would vote and decide on local issues, like what plants to crop and to harvest. Witchcraft. The most infamous thing the Puritans were known for were the Salem witch trials. These trials started because of a group of young girls who started acting out and acting strangely, and started accusing community members of committing acts of witchcraft against them. Most of who were accused held some sort of importance to society. They could have had a lot of land, a lot of money, or some power in the town. The Salem witch trials. Both men and women were accused. If you pled innocent, which means that you didn't commit this crime, you were considered a witch and were often put to death by hanging. If you were pled guilty, you were left alone. If you said you were a witch, you were left alone. However, you would be shunned by society. Approximately, which means about 20 people were put to death by hanging or other measures, and about 17 people died in jail. Be sure to do your questions column and your summary at the bottom of your notes.